Hello, my friends. Welcome to New Kids with a Shop, brought to you by the Arcade Comics, Collectibles, and Games, located in rainy Fort Wayne, Indiana. I am Matt Cade.
And I am Craig Ray, and this is Heroes and Villains. Hey everybody, welcome back to New Kids with a Shop. This week is called Heroes and Villains. We are joined again by Shayne Pace.
Hey everybody.
And we have a new guest this week, which we're excited about. Today we are joined also by Rick. I don't know if he wants us to tell his last name or not.
Shupe.
Shupe. And we're going to start this off with Rick giving us a little bit of an introduction into his love of comics and how, he started on the journey. And then after that, we will get into some other new stuff. We've got some new segments for you this time. We're going to try to start working, like I said, on our format, like we've talked about before. And we're really excited about the show today. So, Rick, if you want to start it off, you want to talk about how you started your journey into comic fandom?
I was lucky. I started at a time where life was simpler. It was in the 50s, and there weren't many things for kids to do. They didn't have video games and that sort of thing. We had bicycles and baseball cards, and one of the things that I wanted to do was read, and my parents had grown up in the 30s, and they were familiar with and had seen the very first issues of a lot of the comic books that grew to be very popular, and my dad had collected and read Superman and Batman. So one day when we were at the pharmacy, he walked me over to the newsstand, and he picked up a Superman and Batman comic that looked interesting to him, and he rewarded me with those for good behavior around the house or helping mom or something. And so that's where I got a chance to find an illustrated story, which really excited me. I had only read some other printed materials before with no pictures, so this was really exciting to see the dynamic artwork, and Superman and Batman, caught my interest right away.
What year do you think that was?
That would have been about 1957, I think.
Do you remember what issue it was?
Not right this second. If I looked at some covers, though, it sometimes jogs my memories, and I can remember exactly what it was. It would have been around Batman number 102, maybe, or something like that, and Detective, or maybe it was Detective 232. Those are numbers that stick in my head. It's been a while. I can't remember. The other one was an Action Comics, but I also don't remember the number of that.
I think that's good enough. That gives perspective as far as when roundabouts it was that you started, which I thought that was, I've always thought that was so cool from, when you came into the shop that, you've been at this a long time, and you've actually physically touched books that I've only dreamed of touching or seeing, which is always kind of cool. But I also want to take this opportunity to talk about, I remember because my wife told me, our very first experience with you, Rick, was on our opening day. And it wasn't comic book related at all. I don't know if you remember, but up here where we're recording in the loft, the very first thing you did in this building was offer to help my wife take out the trash. And I knew from that moment, when she told me, I didn't even know your name at that point, because she told me that a nice person offered to help her with the trash. And then from then, taking out the trash and knowing all you know about comic books, that's a win, right? So
Yeah, you guys were pretty busy that day, and there had been a lot of freebies, and everyone had filled the trash cans, and I know she was struggling with one of them, so I definitely wanted to go over and try and help out.
Well, that also, on top of everything else with the, the comic knowledge and everything, left an impact on me as far as, it spoke to your character, and I think, we've been good friends ever since, so that was awesome.
We sure have.
Is there anything else? So, like, the other thing that was interesting, and I think the first thing that drew you to this shop in particular was, like, this is your neighborhood that you grew up in, and you used to, like, ride your bike up and down the street, going to the different pharmacies?
Oh, yeah.
Your bike permit?
It started out that as I grew in my interest of comics, I couldn't get all that I wanted at the neighborhood pharmacy, so I'd start riding my bike around, sometimes with and without parental permission due to the distances. But some of the stores that had spinner racks were up here on State Street. And then once I had this new bike, we started hearing reports in the news that there were more and more bikes being stolen from kids when they would leave them outside of a store or at school. And so the police department had established a program where we would have a bicycle license, a little decal that we put on our back fender, and it would have an identifying number on it so that the police, when they recovered these bicycles or found them in suspicious circumstances, they would have a way of connecting them with a local citizen. And because they were very busy with their patrols, the fire department was designated as the agency that would take the information and record the data about the owner and keep it in a file so that the police could then connect the bike with the student or the child. And so my closest fire station was here. It's fire station number 1 on State Street. And my sister and I rode our bikes up here and knocked on the front door, and firefighters came out and took information from us and wrote it on a little card and applied our decal. And it was very exciting to go into a fire station and be a child, especially now coming in here as a customer and being in the store all the time talking with you guys about comics. It's really a great thing to have experienced and have that as a memory.
Yeah, you told us that story before as far as your first experience in the building. We just always thought that was so cool. I mean, as far as...
That was 1963, by the way.
That's awesome.
So year my dad was born.
That's awesome. So anything else? Before we move on to the next segment, Rick, that you want to, as far as like...
What books do you remember when you were young that had an impact on you? And
Well, my mom saw me reading Superman and Batman fairly regularly right away, but she had grown up reading Wonder Woman and The Flash. So she kept trying to get me to try those, and I did. And I think Wonder Woman at that time was being taken over by Ross Andru, and his particular art caught my eye. I thought he drew Wonder Woman really pretty, and he had a lot of exciting sea monsters and different things that she would be encountering, and so I got interested in that. And the Silver Age Flash was just starting, and I got just really absorbed into Barry Allen and Carmine Infantino and his portrayal of someone moving at great speed. I thought he did a really cool thing, drawing all those little subtle after images and such of the Flash racing down the street, and I just thought it was fantastic. So those books were important to me. But a little bit later on, maybe second grade, I got, or maybe first grade, I got really involved in Green Lantern because he was a test pilot, and Hal Jordan, the alter ego, was a test pilot, and he was fascinating and heroic and brave in a special way that I could relate to, because we know of aircraft in the sky and how much it must, what nerve it must take and education must take to do that well, and that interested me. And
on the untested planes.
Yes, on the untested planes. And then, of course, the sci-fi element was very exciting. And in the time I grew up in the 50s, everything in the movies for kids was sci-fi related. There were aliens and UFOs, and we had Forbidden Planet and, things like that. So it was important to see that element with the alien bestowing that ring on him and giving him those powers.
what was your favorite series growing up? What was the book that kept drawing you back to it, no matter the time or length away?
Well, it's hard to pick favorites because I had liked all of them for special reasons.
When you say all of them, I mean...
Oh, those characters I mentioned, Superman, Batman, Flash, maybe less so Wonder Woman. I think Green Lantern kind of supplanted her.
But DC?
Hawkman, then with...
Oh, yeah, we've talked about Hawkman.
Oh, yeah.
Joe Kubert
Those
came on and was
beautiful
drawing
covers.
this beautiful, beautiful picture of this alien police officer who was coming to Earth to share his knowledge and also learn from Earth's history as to how we used to battle evil. And so his
Thanagar.
He was from planet Thanagar, and he moved to a museum here in the United States where he had all the ancient weapons at his disposal, and he would go out at night and fight crime using like a crossbow or a mace. And it was very exciting the way Joe Kubert was the same fellow who did Sergeant Rock, so he knew how to draw action and men fighting, and it was, and then to have wings and be in the sky, how much cooler could that be than that?
Did you ever like any of the early war comics?
Well, my dad had been in the military, and he had some bad times over there, and I think maybe we didn't keep many war comics around the house for the reason that it was I didn't want to upset Dad or get him thinking about bad things. So I really didn't read too many when I was young. I did read some Sergeant Rock, and when Stan did Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos over at Marvel, I did read the first year or so of that, and I was careful not to, ruffle any feathers by having those books around.
Contraband.
Because he wasn't against them. I don't think he really knew why I was doing it.
You were consciously trying not to bring those memories back to the
because
forefront?
he had mentioned there'd been some tough ones, so I just decided it was smarter for me to keep that out of the conversation.
Yeah.
And you told us many times you shared a lot of books with your mom, especially, or that you guys would read the same titles. Did that have a...
Mom, briefly with me when I was a boy, she encouraged me by reading with me, but that didn't last long. I did have friends in the neighborhood who were approximately my age, and because, like I said, kids only had a few things to do, we all read comic books. There was no big deal about reading comic books. If you didn't have a comic book, you were odd. And so we would all go down and sit on my front porch, which was the largest porch of all the houses, and sometimes we wouldn't even sit in the chairs. We'd sit on the floor and just in the sunlight read our comics and lay on our bellies and flip pages and share comics and even traded comics,
Or cut them into action figures.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, there was a time where our minds were excited by what we were reading, and we wanted adventure. We wanted to act out. And one of the things we did was, since there were no action figures back then, there were little green army men, like you see in Toy Story, and that was about all there was. So we would, we went in the kitchen and melded a few faces and tried to make superheroes out of those army men, but it didn't work very well. So we would cut the covers off certain comics, not everyone, but, we saw a cool pose where Green Lantern was using his ring, or Flash was running in a neat way, or Batman had a batarang in his hand, and we would cut those off and sometimes glue them onto cardboard and make little action figures to play with, and we would keep them in a Kleenex box to reuse other days. So, and there was no stigma about the comic not having a complete cover. Sometimes we'd even leave the logo on and just cut off the action scene, and then you had a comic that was kind of a weird amalgam of what it had been, but no one had a feeling that was bad about a comic that didn't have a cover on. As a matter of fact, stores that used to return comic covers for credit would still sell the bare comic, even though they weren't supposed to. They would sell it in bags, like old Apple bags. You could get 10 comics for $1, and they would be ones you might have missed on the newsstand.
So for the kids out there, apples are also a fruit. That's what Rick is referring to as a fruit.
Generally are eaten.
Yes, not a computer and or phone. When he says apple bag, it's not what you're thinking about.
Fruit bag. So yeah, that was and when you had found a cool pose and you cut a cover character off, that maybe would diminish the value only in the sense that if you were going to trade a comic with a neighbor for one that you had missed at the newsstand, you might have to trade 2 comics for one because one of yours didn't have the complete cover on it. But that didn't seem important to us. We still got to read the story and look at the art, and really that's the only reason we were buying them, is to the continuing story of our favorite characters and the exciting new villain or menace that they had to encounter. It wasn't really that we were going to save them for making money, because no one had that idea back then, or at least no child.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some adults in a secondhand store were thinking along that line, but no children were thinking like that.
And did you read continuously from that age till...
I never stopped.
Until when did you stop, basically?
I got in a change of life as far as career and location, and I stopped around 84 for, a short time. And I picked back up again when things settled down. And then I read to 97. And again, big change in my life, and mostly financial. I dropped out. So I've just started, since you guys opened up, reading again.
And we've always joked with ourselves about how we could name a book from the 80s, and the penciler, the inker, and we're not joking. He does. He knows.
It doesn't seem real sometimes, because So
That was never important to me when I was a kid. I don't know why. I knew what I liked and what I didn't like, but I never remembered who penciled that or who inked that.
I think I recognized writers and the artist tagged on the book,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But in that, I got very, very excited about that. But like the level of immersion that you talk about it with is amazing.
It is.
It's like you don't even talk about like I wish. I wish every single conversation had been like recorded, because if you look at those things, you're like, yes, it's so and so. It says that he penciled it, but we actually know now at this time that it was a whole family doing it at the kitchen table. Like, was that one again? Do you remember specifically what I'm talking about? About how
But we have
they were
it.
just doing like an assembly line and then releasing the books.
Oh, Vince Coletta, the inker over at Marvel.
Yeah, that guy.
We've brought up titles from the literal books from the 80s or runs from the 80s, and it was inked by so and so.
Yeah.
You know, the reason it stuck in my mind, I guess, is because when I started reading comics, they weren't permitting the artists to identify themselves. It was supposed to be an industry book from a certain company. You were supposed to think of National Periodical Publications, which was what DC was when I was reading them. And if it was a national book, it was just national. You knew Batman and Superman were national, and you didn't need to know Kurt Swan was drawing it or Sheldon Moldoff was drawing it, or Gil Kane, or Carmine Infantino. You just knew it was national. And so Stan, that was one of the great things Stan did. He started letting people put their names on things, and he started making fun by giving people nicknames like Jolly Jack Kirby and Smilin' Stanley. And so that started making it important for there to be artists' names and inkers and letterers' names. But DC did allow a few to creep through because Bob Kane, the original co-creator of Batman, had insisted on his name being in his contract on every appearance of Batman, as if it was his signed signature, as if he had done the comic. But of course, he had ghost artists doing it, like Sheldon Moldoff did most of the early ones that I read from the 60s and 50s. But they allowed Joe Kubert to put his name on a few Sergeant Rocks, and who else? One or two others slipped their name in there too. So occasionally we would learn one, but it took so much effort to learn, and then we would pore over the book and try and memorize the style. So when we saw it again, we knew who it really was.
So do you feel like part of that, in the pursuit of that, was because you were solving a mystery?
That's partly it, but also we just loved comics so much. We loved the characters.
Do you want to tell your Stan Lee story?
You mean meeting Stan? Some of
Yes.
the times I met him about 3 times. He and I happened to see him my first time when he had retired from Marvel as far as active work, and he was a figurehead for the company, probably a compensated figurehead, but he was just going to conventions and being an emissary, promoting the company and trying to enjoy his retirement. And I happened to see him once when people didn't know what he looked like. I think imagine clear back then. And he was just wandering around the room. And I had read those early Marvel comics where they used to print photos, black and white photos of the artists and writers in the back, and occasionally, and for special editions. And so I recognized him right away. And of course, there had been cartoonist versions of him. I think Jack drew him and Stan at the Fantastic Four's wedding and different things. So I knew basically what he looked like anyways, and I recognized him. And I went over and began chatting him up when he was just wandering around the room one day. And we talked quite a while, and he asked me about different stories, and I told him what my feelings were about him and which ones I liked and so on. And he said, wow, from talking to you, I can really tell that you actually read those things. You're not just looking for some kind of gratification from meeting a celebrity, as it were. He said, you sound like you've really read the stories, and I believe that you did. And we talked a little further, and he noticed I had a hardback under my arm that I had purchased. It was a collection. I already had all the old Spider-Man comics, but I had bought a hardback collection of Marvel Masterworks Spider-Man Volume 1, and I just wanted to have it because it was cool looking and had everything all in one place, and he had written a little editorial in the front of it, and he had said, can I look at that book you've got? And I took it up from underneath my arm and gave it to him, and he said, I know you're a real fan, and I want to write this for you. And he sat down at a chair and wrote in my book to my friend Richard, and I teared up. It was great.
That's wow.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's
And you brought that book in too. You showed it to us.
He was very nice to me. He treated me very, very kindly. I just think the most of him.
That's awesome. And it's cool hearing stories. I mean, and I'm not doing this to like highlight your age or anything like that, because that's completely irrelevant as far as the topic at hand, other than the fact that I'm jealous that
We're there in
that
57.
you were there. Yeah. So,
You know
but-
what, Stan, can I say one other thing? I
Yeah,
saw
please.
Stan a couple other times, like I mentioned, and what was funny is sometimes he recognized me, and he signed 2 other books for me, just his name, just to say hi, kind of, hi, and he put his name on stuff, and then we'd have a talk. And it wasn't for the autograph, it was just he was doing that to kind of acknowledge he was seeing me again. And I thought, that means a lot to someone. I'd read comics all my life, and
He probably
he cared,
Yeah.
that I cared, I guess. And that's so cool. When you meet a hero and they're cool,
when they're human.
yeah. He was a very, very nice man.
That's awesome. But just for instance, let's say you did run into him at a different con, and there was a choice between Vampirella or you to sit on his lap. In those circumstances,
That was the story I was asking about.
yeah.
Oh, I'm
In that circumstance, like, who would he choose to sit on his lap?
Yeah, one time we were at a big convention. I can't remember if it was Atlanta or Chicago or Orlando, somewhere in there. But
Name dropper.
I know.
Man.
there was the pre-cosplay, before that was a thing.
Yeah.
The companies that maybe didn't have a big group of artists or writers that could go and run around to the conventions and promote their works would instead send a model who would dress like one of their characters, and she would sit at a table and promote, like Harris Comics would have Vampirella show up, and it would be a beautiful girl who was in this, very revealing superhero costume of the character Vampirella. And she would strut around the auditorium, and people would wonder who it was and try to talk to her, and she would lead them over to the Harris booth and maybe give out free samples. And so it was a way to get the comic company some attention. Well, by going to the same conventions again and again, she had gotten to know Stan a little bit, and they were sitting at the same table on opposite ends when I walked by one day. And I said hi to Stan. And I said, hey, can I get a picture? I didn't get a picture last time. He said, sure, but I'll only do it if you let my girlfriend sit here. And he grabbed Vampirella and pulled her across the edge of the table and pulled her up on his lap or next to him very, very closely. And he took a picture with me and Vampirella in the middle. So that was a lot of fun.
Game.
Huh?
Stand with the game.
He wasn't shy because he had his arm around her waist.
Man.
And she laughed and loved it. And she wasn't like, any kind of harassment. She was a friend.
That's cool. No, I mean, I think you showed us that picture as well.
Yes, you have.
Which is awesome. So, as you guys can tell, Rick is amazing. And, like, I wish, and part of the reason we're having him on here is because it feels, again, selfish not to share.
His knowledge.
It's an incredible amount, incredible stories, and we really do want to thank you for coming on, Rick. We know that, there was some apprehension as far as, like, getting on here and chatting, but I'd say you're doing more than fine. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So moving on, we're going to move into a segment we're going to call Issues. And what we're going to try to do with this is we're going to take a book that we have read, like, in the previous week, as far as it doesn't have to necessarily be new. It could be an older issue. And then also some graphic novels and things like that, and kind of break them down and explain them, and not like a thumbs up, thumbs down situation, but we'll let you know, like, how we feel about them. And this week we decided on Black Cloak, which actually was a book that was released this past week. It's an Image book, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I was thrilled that it was triple sized. The art is, the first few pages, I was kind of like, and I don't know how you guys felt about it, but
It was because it had so many covers, and each one was gorgeous.
it's like
Yes.
photorealistic-ish.
Yeah. And then you open up, and it's a little bit more, I'd say, cartoonish, a little flat, but
Yeah.
it fits the material so well as you go on. Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, Shayne, if you want to kick it off, like, just what did you think in general as far as the book goes?
There's so many number ones now, and it's hard to pick, when you get a poll each week of 10 or 20 books to bring on something new, but the covers were so striking. They were so good. The Jeff DeCal one, which I got in particular. So I was willing to take a dive. Image has a pretty good track record with me. And I didn't know it was going to be a detective story. I didn't know it was going to be a mystery, and I didn't know it was going to be triple sized. And I got
88
about
pages.
Yeah. And
It's a thick boy.
you pick it out and you think it's going to be one thing, and about 10 pages in, I was hooked.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually, I'll read the blurb. I'll read what everybody got to read as far as ordering it, and then we can compare it to that and see how you think it lined up. So, Eisner Award-winning writer Kelly Thompson heads to Image for the first time with Black Cloak, an all-new series with artist Meredith McLaren. Blade Runner's style mixes with saga-esque drama in a delectable fantasy sci-fi blend as two Black Cloaks try to solve the murder of a beloved prince in Kyros, the last city in the known world. Before his murder tips the city into war, the mystery begins in a spectacular
triple-length first issue.
Triple-length first issue.
Now, I will say calling it saga-esque drama is just a way to name drop saga in the blurb.
Yes.
It's like, hey...
Saga-esque people.
And then Blade Runner was the
Blade Runner, yes.
Yeah.
I mean...
You had me at Blade Runner.
So, based upon that, I was interested. Do I think it's completely accurate? No. If you say saga-esque, it's like, yes, there are creatures that are not human in this.
Are they flying in a tree through space?
People with hands that are saga-esque.
Right.
Yeah, just a way to get it in there. But, whatever it takes to sell the book, that's fine.
But it was a really good book.
And then the book itself is terrific, yeah.
So, the mystery, I'm glad that the first issue was as long as it was, because it was kind of a slow burn. And just to compare another Image title, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I feel like Invincible or a book like that is one that definitely would have
benefited
from a triple first issue. Because looking back now, when I think about Invincible, wasn't issue 1 just them eating breakfast?
Yeah, it was a lot of Robert Kirkman.
Yeah,
dialogue.
So it was nice because you got through that first part and you're like, oh, you can tell this is like where it would have ended, but I've got more to read now and I don't have to wait.
Yeah.
Or Radiant Black even, perhaps, too.
Yes, to bring it back around. I agree. Absolutely. So I would say,
It's a good read. I would definitely be picking up number 2.
It is on, it's on my poll. If you haven't read it, I suggest you go out and read it. And if you have read it, definitely pick up number 2, obviously. It's been fantastic so far, and I'm looking forward to it. Matt, you have anything else to add to that?
3 thumbs up.
3 thumbs up. Okay.
And I do believe it. How many issues did it say? Was it just 3 issues? Because they've only proposed the first 3 covers.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to tell anymore because,
Yes. Yeah.
Ram's Swamp Thing was only supposed to be 8. And then it's like, did we say 8? We meant...
If it makes money, it's going to continue.
Yeah. So
that's how it works.
We'll see where Black Cloak goes. I can totally see it.
And the covers are...
fantastic.
8 covers. Every one of them is pretty as the last one. And there's a Momoko cover, and it doesn't... The Momoko cover in this case didn't stand out.
Yeah.
They were all beautiful.
There's a cow, man.
It was hard to pick, but yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Next... moving from that, we're going to run also another new segment, and this one is called Character Obscura, where we will be discussing a character that may not be super popular as far as mainstream, but we feel is worthy of your attention. And this is Shayne's baby right here today, and I believe you're going to be discussing Monkey Prince, is it?
Oh, bury the lead. Yes. I was for the inaugural...
Do you even get Monkey Prince?
Oh, man. Fun fact, there's only one poll for Monkey Prince at this store as of today.
there's 2 now.
2, okay. The other extremely cool person that comes in here, apparently.
Yes, but I buy every cover for you.
Yes, yes. So I am a DC fan, tried and true. I always have been, and whenever there is a new, because you get dozens of new characters all the time, and whenever one stands out that gets added to the roster that I think has something to it, has a little something special, has some staying power, I jump right on it. And Monkey Prince, I was just whole hog. The fact that it comes from one of my favorite cartoonists working right now, Gene Luen Yang, who did Dragon Hoops, Boxers and Saints, and it's about to become a Disney Plus series, American Born Chinese. And I saw he premiered in late 2001 in Festival of Heroes from DC. Had one of the stories. And then a few months later...
2021?
2021, what did I say?
2001.
It feels like he's been around for decades. So 2021... and
that's that's how deep this character is.
That's right.
Ladies and gentlemen.
And then a few months later, his ongoing began.
Yep.
And I was hooked from the very, very beginning. It's about... His name's Marcus Shugoshen, or Marcus' son. And he's a teenager who lives in Gotham with his folks. So you can see him interacting with Damian, and he's heard of Batman, and it's great. He finds out through his spirit guide, Shifu Pigsy, that he is the son of the Chinese mythical figure, the Monkey King. Now, if you tell a teenager that you're the son of a Chinese mythical figure, there's going to be a little bit of pushback, and Marcus was no different. And he's still, as of now, I think we're on issue 10.
Yes.
It's forthcoming. He's still learning how to deal with his powers. But it's also great because the more he steps into his role and the more he hangs around real superheroes, he's fought with Batman, he's fought with Aquaman now. He has a very large crush on Supergirl, as does anyone who's seen or met Supergirl.
Absolutely.
Yes. He's learning to inhabit his role as a hero more and more, instead of just a punk kid who doesn't want anything to do, doesn't want to. Yeah. So I think it's great to see the current DC universe from the eyes of a teenager who you don't hate and who is becoming a hero in his own right. And I think he's got a huge future as one of the mainstay DC characters. I'd put him up there with Yara Flor,
Yep.
Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, and Sojourner Mullen.
So, and truth be told, I didn't get on board early. So, just for the kids out there, what are his powers?
That, even having read all the issues, is something that it's hard to pin down. His appendages come off.
Okay.
He has super strength. He can float when he concentrates.
Only when he concentrates?
Yes. If he loses concentration, his powers don't work nearly as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
He has to channel.
and we're still at the point where we are discovering powers.
He's still discovering powers. I personally don't think the full scope of his powers have been
So that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
I mean, to read a book where you're like, it's a mystery to everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Even to the character. And every time he discovers something, it's like you or I discovering a new thing that we can do. Like,
So it's cool. I mean, I hate to compare it to this. I can't compare it to Monkey Prince because I haven't read it. But like, that was one of my favorite things about Smallville when it was on. I mean, yes, it was very episodic, and it wasn't like, it's not the greatest show of all time, but it was fun. Like when it was like breadcrumb by breadcrumb releasing the X-ray vision and all that, all the different abilities and how it like that changed how he was a hero.
yeah.
And things like that.
I would compare it even, Rick, you'll know, to Billy Batson discovering everything that he could do. You're seeing it through the, like, I'll say childlike wonder. This comic is whimsical in a time where cynicism is what rules most comics. It's like, no, we can still find out how much fun it is to learn how to fly today.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and that's Monkey Prince. So
I agree. That's the most exciting kind of reading for me, is to read a character who's learning about their abilities at the same time you are. That was the way it was for me with Flash and Green Lantern when I started them, because that was their beginning, the Silver Age versions. And you had this, Top Gun type of aviator, Hal Jordan, who got this alien ring, and he knew nothing about what we now know about the Guardians of the Galaxy. He barely understood what the power battery was for. So to see him grow over like a 1 or 2 year period to figure out how to use the powers in the first place, that's what made it interesting to me.
did it have a 24-hour charge from the very beginning?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And his oath has 24 words he has to recite.
yes.
In brightest day and
In
blackest night,
no evil shall escape my sight.
Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light. Those 24 words are what gives him time to have his ring in the power battery and gain the charge he needs to fight crime.
Did you ever read through Blackest Night? Did you get that far, Rick? Because I think we talked about it.
No, I think that came out after I was dropped out.
Well, you just would have been angry anyway, because they made some lanterns with an unlimited battery, and it's like, what?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things for me to come back into the hobby, and I have resisted some books that maybe I would normally like to read, but I've resisted because there's just been too many modernizations.
Yeah.
It's a swift-moving stream.
I'm sure it's works well for younger minds, but for an old guy who was there at a different time, it's too much of a change. It's too radical.
Do you enjoy modern comics with the art the way it is instead of the 4 colors that you grew up with?
Believe it or not, it's not as attractive to me as a lot of people talk about. I don't mind what I grew up, the newsprint that I grew up with. I just guess I got used to it. I mean, when they started printing comics, I don't know, in the 80s with a slick paper,
Frank Miller's.
I didn't really like that. I don't, when they put them into collections sometimes.
I drop
it's
my books
different.
all the time now. It's crazy. It's way too slick.
Yeah, well, that's what we called it back then. I
High
don't know
gloss
what
of the 90s.
Yeah.
for terminology really is, but I don't know. I mean, I see value in having brighter colors and making it pretty, but because art is a big part of loving comics. But for some reason, when I look at my classic characters, I just want to see them the way I saw them when I was little.
Well, sure. Like who? So when you think Batman, who is the artist?
Well, I mean, my favorite was Dick Sprang
Yes.
and Jerry Robbins, and those were the two that I really liked. But the one I most commonly saw was Sheldon Moldoff, and I did get very used to how he drew things, and I appreciated what he did. Of course, we all thought it was Bob Kane at the time, but I mean, for me, Dick Sprang was very special.
It's awesome.
That's the Robin I see is Dick Springs. Yeah.
All right. So that was character obscura.
Thank you, Shayne.
Good job.
Big
Yeah.
Shayne.
Fine.
I'm interested now in that character.
No, honestly, because I mean, knowing nothing about it, like that sounds a lot more interesting.
The Monkey Prince craze is going to sweep the nation. You watch.
You can't tell that you just picked that book up for the first time 3 minutes ago.
We are starting the wave right now.
That's awesome. That's going to lead us directly to the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is heroes and villains. And I think we were excited to take this opportunity to discuss. Each of us go around and talk about a hero and like their origin. That it may not necessarily be your favorite. It can be your favorite. It can be a comic. It can be whatever else. But just a level of interest where it's captured something within you or your imagination or the imagination of everyone. And we're going to do this, both with a hero and a villain, to just kind of make it like an open table discussion. But what would you say? We'll start with you, actually, Shayne.
Okay.
Like, who would you choose as that hero as far as the origin and everything that just all encompassing, like just captures that interest?
So my four favorite superheroes never change, but number 5 always cycles through 3 different heroes: Zatanna, Scott Free's Mr. Miracle, and this character who I'm choosing today, Deadman. Do
you know anybody that has a first appearance of Deadman?
as luck would have it,
Was it in your trunk earlier?
never. I was carrying this on my lap. I have he premiered in Strange Adventures number 205 in 1967.
Really? I think we have a copy.
And I
right
have
here.
a copy right here. This is my copy for those watching at home,
It's not. It's mine.
and it is one of my most prized possessions. And in this, Boston Brand is a cocky, some would say kind of a dick trapeze artist, but he's very, very good, and he will do what no one else can do on the trapeze artist. That's why his moniker is the Dead Man. They think that at any moment this is going to be the one, but it never is. And he dresses. He has the mask of a skeleton. One day, while he's doing his act, he's sabotaged and murdered by a mysterious figure called the Hook. The Hook, who's part of a group called, I think, the Scavengers, something like that. Yes.
Sounds familiar.
So anyway, he's resurrected by the Hindu god Ramakrishna, his comics, and he now has the power to inhabit anyone's body, and he sets about trying to solve his own murder, and that is just wonderful. And through
And he's obviously, as a trapeze artist, that's definitely one of his strong suits, right? As far
Yes.
as discovering, his murderer.
I mean, it was a good solid lead, but it was I've always liked that, like, Boston Brand, the character's name, became a much better person dead than he ever was alive. He learned how to empathize and be a hero that he could have never been had he not been murdered. And I can't think of another character like that. Also, fun fact, he has a brother. What's his brother's first name? Boston Brand's brother is indeed named Cleveland.
Nice.
Yes, and he was also co-created by Arnold Drake of Doom Patrol and Carmine Infantino, who we already talked about. Now, Carmine Infantino did The Flash, but who else did he do? One of my favorites, The Elongated Man.
There you go.
So the Dead Man is right in my wheelhouse. Not the Dead Man.
Right.
Right.
Gotcha.
And DC has a long tradition of trapeze artists as heroes.
The Graysons.
Robin in 1940 and the original Batwoman in 1956.
I love her.
She was
I love
a
her
trapeze
outfit.
artist and a stunt motorcycle rider.
Yep.
Where did the trapeze artist come from? Like, that just seems so...
One assumes trapeze artist was the highest paying job in 1920s America, right behind like the president, oil baron, and trapeze artist.
It's like, I gotta find work. There's nothing to do. Like, you could always be a trapeze artist. Get out there and make something of yourself.
Like Charlie Chaplin and whatever the trapeze artist was that week were the biggest names in America.
You know, Central Florida used to have a amusement park where you would go and live your best idea of what it would be to be in a circus. And they had a tent where you could go and be a trapeze artist for a day.
They had to close down when dozens of people died.
Well, you know, you had restraints on and safety gear, but it was very exciting because
Mine was better.
I visited there with a friend once, and she got up on the trapeze and did some stunts that they taught her to do in that just within the day. So it was a big thing back then. And there's the film Cecil B. DeMille's Greatest Show on Earth had a
Oh, yes.
trapeze plot in it. It was a big thing in that era.
Fun fact, that is the first movie Steven Spielberg saw in the theater.
Nice.
Yes, true.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
You come here for the comics, stay for the fun facts.
I loved it. Dorothy Lamour was in it because she was a comedic actress with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby for those road pictures. That
I was
liked
seeing
when
Road-
I was a kid.
Road to Morocco right now.
Yeah. So,
Not comic related, but wait a minute, it kind of is because DC contracted with celebrities in the '60s to do to build their empire, and they had Bob Hope Comics, who was
Wow.
a member of that.
I tell you, man.
And they had Jerry Lewis, and they had Phil Silvers. Those were the three I remember. That I
Sergeant
used to buy.
Bilko.
Yeah.
Yes.
He had his own comic
Oh,
at DC.
boy.
But the Bob
I'd have
Hope
read
comic
those.
did really well, and went on and on and
Bob
on.
Hope was huge. He was bigger than the trapeze artists.
Yes, he was.
That's how big.
Gosh, if I knew it was going to be this fun, I would have come here earlier.
See?
it is fun. It's a blast. We're just hanging out. It's awesome. Speaking of awesome, Matt, do you have what should you choose for your hero?
When we discussed this, we talked about our favorite heroes, and I'm going to kind of cheat because my favorite hero is it's more a literary term and more from books, and it's Roland Shayne. There is a Marvel series, the Dark Tower books that Marvel printed.
What is Roland Shayne from?
He is from Stephen King's The Dark Tower, The Gunslinger,
The Gunslinger.
and he is the last gunslinger in a wasteland. He first premiered in the 1978 The Gunslinger book, but Marvel 2008 they turned it into a comic. They did the adaptation for that, and
Was the first one Long Road Home? Was that the first series they did?
it was Gunslinger Born.
Gunslinger Born. That's
Yeah,
right.
it was 7 issues.
Yes, sir.
And it which they did the adaptation a little different. They started in the middle kind of and worked their way back. In the books, in the novels, it's Wizard and Glass, which is the 4th book,
Yes.
and most of the book is about his childhood and how he became himself. And it's full of woe. I mean,
Yeah.
he murders his own mother accidentally.
It is. It's tragic, but it's
It
awesome.
It is so good.
It is so good.
It is so good.
Series ever.
Yeah.
Have you happened to read that, Rick? Have you done any Dark Tower at all?
I have not.
Okay. Well, I'm just.
I saw the previews for the recent film. That's the extent of my.
Womp, womp.
Yeah, just forget that.
Tower knowledge.
Forget you ever saw that.
I'm a comic guy, you know.
Yeah.
Matt, what did the art do for you in those comics? The Jay Lee.
Oh my god.
Right.
Well, I had stopped. Like I said last time, I had been at a point in my life where I wasn't collecting, and I got back. I was getting divorced, and then I saw that they were making an adaptation of The Gunslinger, and that brought me back into comics. And the first thing I picked up was that, and I saw Jay Lee. So I hold a good place in my heart for Jay Lee, and every time I see his art, it makes me a little happier because he brought a lot of joy with those books.
That made him a superstar too.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. But he has a very singular style that when you see a Jay Lee piece, you know he did it.
Like a lot of people, I thought Jim Lee for the longest time. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Why do they keep misspelling it, and why is he drawing so different now?
This guy's amazing. This looks like a completely different artist.
They're wrong. I'm not being stupid.
Yeah.
So to bring it back to Roland specifically, though, like what about him was intriguing to you? Like what?
Well, the first time I read it,
character?
I was young the first time I read it, and in the very first book, The Gunslinger, he talks about how he became a gunslinger, or he became a man, and he had to best his instructor Court in single combat, and if
So it's like a rite of passage type thing.
yes, but if he did not pass, he would be cast out of society and always cast out. He'd always be a loner and a loser, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But
Little did he know that that's what he was going to get when he won anyway.
exactly. But he bested Court, and he did it with by using his one true friend at the time, which was his hawk David. Nice. He sacrificed his hawk David to beat Court, and he did. And then, that part was written in 1978, and then in the fourth novel, Wizard and Glass, it continues from there, and then we start there where it's the next morning, and that part was written in 1996. And it doesn't feel that way. It feels like it was always one continuous piece. And in Wizard of Glass, he is put aside because he's angered some very powerful people by just passing the test, because he was goaded into it. And he travels with two of his friends to do make work, and he ends up finding a conspiracy against the crown or the realm, and him and his buddies, and he finds true love along the way too.
Yeah.
And she's taken from him.
Which is my absolute, I mean, that story. So Wizard and Glass, that's the reason why it's my favorite book. And that's
It'll
because
make you feel all the things.
it
Boy.
is, especially as a growing up and being a boy, like the way that it's written,
Yes.
it's cool.
It's very,
And it's like,
of boyhood.
yes, it's like, it's written and his pals were my pals.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and his experience.
This is the guy who wrote it, and it it feels very much.
And you're like, this is the most beautiful like romance novel I've
everyone
ever
here,
read.
mark my words, Stephen King. You watch him. He's going to be big.
He's going to be a thing.
He's going to be huge.
But it's also a science fiction slash Western slash fantasy book, which if you tried to read something similar to that, you would have a hard time finding anything
It's
at all.
Crazy.
Such a balancing act.
And it works so well.
Yeah.
I don't know why there isn't. Every book isn't written like that.
It's like Camelot with cowboys, ish,
with a little bit of
right?
science fiction put in there.
And sometimes robots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it breaks the genre, breaks all the genres.
Yeah. And a great big bad.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And you
All hail.
Yes.
read it.
Crimson King.
Yes.
read it, and you're just like, this guy's so badass.
It's very Shakespearean.
Like he's just tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like
He's the fastest gun. He's
Yeah.
he's the best at everything he tries without trying anything.
the best teacher. You know,
Yes.
as far as he ends up being, because
Always reluctantly.
yeah.
Yes.
But always.
Just, but it was cool because it was never like, he didn't feel super powered in a way. Like,
No.
it was everything was very,
But it
fantasy.
would be horrible to be him, because he either kills or hurts everybody he loves,
Yep.
or they're taken from him because of who he is.
But Wizard and Glass and those comics, when they describe his formative years, you see the man.
Yeah, you see the man that he is.
You can see how he came.
You can see how he was built.
What built him? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like in Wizard of Glass, he meets the love of his life, and she gets taken and burned alive because she's been with him, and it's the rest of his life he's wakes up screaming her name from a nightmare, and there is no absolution for him. He is damned for what he does or what he has done.
Which 9 out of 10 times isn't really his fault.
No, it's not.
So
He's a product of his environment.
But hey, we're all Batman fans. We're all big on
yeah,
self-imposed
but it's
punishment.
the thing is the
Yeah.
best part is like, even the hero, right, walks with the exception of who I'm going to discuss at least. Like there's that aspect of it where not everybody's perfect, and there's selfish reasons. Like the entire journey's kind of selfish,
It is. It is.
right? But
He casts so many things aside just for his journey.
right, and it's like, but it's written so real, and he's such like a real character, and it's done in such a way where you can't help but absolutely love him. Like throughout the entire series, you're like, there's times where you just want to like, you want to smack him because you know he can take it. You want to hug him because you know he needs it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like,
Well said.
If you smacked him, you probably wouldn't be getting up
well,
again.
I mean, yeah, but I mean,
But and also ultimately you realize that if the tower falls, the ball game's over anyway.
Yes,
Like,
he's trying to save existence.
he's doing what
the linchpin of existence he is trying to save.
it's incredible. So fantastic hero
And I
pick.
remember when
good.
the first time I read it, I was 8 or 10 or whatever, and I didn't know what matricide was.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people, I mean,
Like, is that when you rip the tag off?
No, I didn't know what it was until I murdered my mom.
That's what it's called.
the charges that they gave me.
It didn't stick.
But it doesn't matter. I also read those books. I try to read them yearly again, or if I'm having a bad day, I'll pick one of them up randomly and start reading it. And they are, they speak to me on a level that nothing else does.
It's good.
It is very good.
Yeah, when he calls us constant readers, he is not joking.
No, he's not.
So,
You had me at robots.
all right. Which leads me into is your pick robot related, Rick?
Richard.
Who's your hero?
Well, I wasn't prepared for anything like this, so I'm just speaking off the top of my head. But I mean, Batman is my favorite. I started with him, and as far as comic books, anyway.
That's a good pick, Rick.
Everybody, he's mine.
But I'm going to take a left turn here now because my favorite novel growing up was Robinson Crusoe. And for that reason, I also had a very strong admiration for Green Arrow because he was marooned on an island by himself, had to survive, and that story, that saga, always appealed to me in a special way. And that he developed the skills to feed himself and protect himself, and then later was able to use them to make a difference in the world that he returned to. That somehow got to me in a special way. So, I mean, you can't deny that Batman is the greatest, I think, the greatest comic book hero origin of all time. And the reason that we know it is because it's been copied 500,000 times by other characters.
we do sell a couple of those books a week.
But Green Arrow has a special place in my heart.
Also, like Deadman, he would not have become the hero that he did had he not gone through getting stranded on that island. Had he not gone through that baptism by fire.
Exactly.
Yeah. He was not on the trajectory of a hero.
And he actually made his $1 billion, right?
Queen, no, that was a dynastic.
Yes, it was a.
Loser.
Ted Cord made his money.
There you go.
Also, Rick, though, when I say my first 4 favorite superheroes never changed, Batman and Green Arrow are 1 and 3, respectively. So you're an
Excellent.
vaunted.
I always feel we have a kinship.
Absolutely. We both have great taste.
Batman's number 1 for me, but I didn't want to pick number 1. I mean, for this exercise, I wanted to try to come up with something different, and
Everyone knows Batman's backstory anyway.
yeah,
They don't have to film it anymore. You just know.
it was now it's just like an animated credit scenes where you show a handgun and some pearls, and
You know. Oh, Batman's mom.
the hammer destroys the necklace, and you're like, oh man,
He can't go anywhere without his parents being shot.
yeah. So I'm. It's just me. All right.
Yeah.
I choose Superman because for one of the reasons that you were talking about Monkey Prince earlier. I was thinking about it, and I love Batman for reality. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. That's like I think what draws everybody to him is like he's just like me. You know, I'm a human, he's a human. But with Superman, it's always it comes back to for me like in the most recent memory as far as like
I always think of Kill
This is
Bill
amazing.
when I think of Superman. The analogy at the end of Kill Bill Volume 2 when he's talking about.
mine is the Tom King double date issue of 38 of the Batman, the newest volume.
Go to the fair.
38
That's
or
when-
44, one of those. I can't remember.
That's where they go to the fair, but before that, it's the separate couples off, and both of them separately are talking about how much they respect the other person. And Clark is like, "Oh man, Bruce is the best. He lost his parents, and he still turned out to be, he's Batman. He's the greatest. And then Bruce on the other side, which, Bruce is like, I lost my parents, but he lost his entire planet, and look how he ended up. And he can do anything he wants to, and he chooses to hang out with me in the Justice League, more or less. That's the moral of it. And then, so I think that's written very well. And I think that...
Batman 37.
37.
Yes.
I knew it was around there. Yeah.
They were both numbers.
So that issue, okay, 37, Batman 37. If you have not read it, it is fantastic. Tom King, dialogue-wise, and that entire issue is just so much fun.
It was very fun.
And that's where Superman comes in for me. Like, Superman is always fun, based upon the fact that I always know his intent. I always know that he's just good. Like, I think I try to put myself in the place of just being, actually physically being what we all aspire to be as a society, as individuals. Like, if we all had the ability to, like, we would be Superman. Like, that's what we're aiming for. But he doesn't take that and recognize that everybody's looking to be that and make him feel like he's a god. I feel like he's just a citizen of everywhere and just tries to be an example. The thing is, I say that, and that's not even accurate, because I don't think he's trying. I just think it's who he is.
Well,
You could thank his parents. You could thank his earthly parents for that, I believe.
Both sets.
Yes.
As far as like the...
by all rights, should be a villain. His world was blew up, and he grew up here, a god amongst humans. He should, by all rights, have been corrupted,
And didn't-
absolutely. And he didn't, because he was a good man.
You don't get to join Little League. Or if you do, you have to pull all of your punches.
Yep. You can't
have to think about every
you have
time
to
you give
think
somebody
about
a hug.
high-fiving your friend
High-fiving
when
your
you're
friends.
8.
Yeah.
And he did. That is the character of Clark.
And it's...
You think all that fear would have driven him mad, or would have driven him to
It probably would have to most,
be
but not
something.
And he's very much like Batman. I stand by this. It's probably not like a weird opinion, but like, Batman is who he is, and Bruce Wayne is the costume, right?
Yes.
And Superman, Clark is Clark, and all he does is change his costume. And it's cool because it's like through and through, there's not any change there. Like, he's able to just be him. Like, that's probably the most comforting thing, is he's able to just be himself 100% all the time. And I think, Shayne, I talked about it as far as like in the new Batman run, the Zdarsky run, when he's getting the shit kicked out of him and he's stuck there, and there's that over the narration voice that says, he's talking about Clark, and how he knows Clark will come, and there's that silhouette shot in the doorway, and just how you have all the feels, because you're like, Superman's here,
things are okay.
It's all right.
That's how things are going to be.
And
all
at
right.
the end of the day, that is why I chose Superman, because instead of cynicism, like you said, you said you opted for the whimsical, in that good feeling. That's why I choose Superman.
There's enough of that. I like the idea that if Superman saves you and then runs into you 3 years later, he'll still remember your name.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll put it out, not to be reductive, but I've always thought if a woman or a man is being mugged
Yes.
in an alley, Batman's going to say, I have to stop that criminal. Superman's going to say, I have
I got
to
to save that woman.
person.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is two sides of the same coin. They're very, yes, that is beautiful. I've never even, considered that.
Got to think about Superman a lot.
I was reinforced with my love for Superman. Like I said, he was one of my first 2 comic books that I read, by the TV show, which was on simultaneously for me back in those days.
The Reeves
George
show?
Reeve
Great show.
played Superman, and they had Whitney Ellsworth, I think, was one of the DC's executive producers, and he was very clever about keeping. They only had a half hour to work with, but he was very clever in keeping Superman in that kind of heroic way of saving Jimmy and Lois or Perry in these most dangerous circumstances. You knew when you heard that music and you heard that whistling sound of him flying through the air that he was going to come crashing through that wall or window, and you just got so excited as a child. I sat there and my eyes would get big, and I just couldn't imagine anything greater than seeing Superman come and save the day. that was a really rewarding thing to read the comic and then see him on TV. Very, very exciting. I really was lucky to have that as a simultaneous experience.
Awesome. And I still think the 78 movie is the best comic book adaptation made yet.
I just actually, since I made this decision, I watched this week, and
Talk about all the feels.
not just that, the way that he plays Clark in Superman, even the subtleties in his, like, I never, younger when I was watching it and things like that, I didn't pick up on the subtleties of the performance even.
It was lightning in a bottle.
It was absolutely insane. Because, okay, do you remember the scene specifically where Lois has it figured out and she shot the gun
Oh, yeah.
and he gives it up
Yeah.
and he's like, well, it was just blanks. But when he's like, oh, Lois, blah, 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 then, with the whole, glasses
when
Clark,
and
whatever.
then when he takes them off,
Yeah, and he's like, what would have happened? If just the little subtle,
Yeah.
it's not like he made his voice deep or whatever else, but went from being non-serious to serious. Or it was
it's
like a weird...
another slight touch in the comics that Clark Kent is shorter than Superman because Clark, of course, slouches.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Reeves remembered that. He did that.
that's fantastic.
Elevator broken. It's a great movie.
It's great. Okay, so we're not off the hook yet because we are going to go back around now, and we're talking villains.
Because it is heroes and
It's
villains.
heroes and villains. So, Shayne, we'll circle back around to you. So, what villain does it for you?
All right, going back to the DC pool, I'm going to pick someone who premiered in 1971 in a little comic, very, very brief cameo in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, and then he had his full appearance proper in Forever People, written and drawn by Jack the King Kirby. We are talking, of course, about DC's big bad, Darkseid.
Darkseid.
What is Darkseid? Darkseid is.
Darkseid
Yes.
is.
He was born on Apocalypse. He killed his brother in order to claim the throne, and he now rules Apocalypse, always in search of the anti-life equation. And he thinks it must be on Earth. There's just too much going on here for it not to be, for him to ignore us. But gosh darn it, whenever he tries to get it, those pesky heroes stop him. One Kryptonian in particular, but Darkseid has survived, 50 years, and still as dangerous and menacing. Well, not in the absolute current continuity, but he's a great villain. And the idea of him and Isaiah the High Father, who rules on New Genesis, and they have there's a prisoner swap because they have a very, very loose. They were warring. New Genesis and Apocalypse were warring for centuries, and they had
It's like that's such a. When you read that and you think about it, it's such a weird truce, right?
Yes, well, because they swapped sons,
Yes,
in order to maintain this very shaky truce. So, Darkseid's son Orion is raised on New Genesis, this paradise, and Highfather's son Mr. Miracle is raised in this hellish, boot camp.
Literally.
Yes,
Scot-free.
where Granny Goodness just puts him through hell every day of his life until he
The lava
escapes,
pits.
because he is and because of course he is the world's greatest escape artist, and he escapes with his now wife Big Barda, and it's just a wonderful, rich mythology. I know people don't always like Jack Kirby's writing. I just think there's so much there to mine, there, and it's endured so long, and like he created an entirely new myth and like God origin story just out of his mind.
As far as his motivations, like what I mean,
Well, he wants to rule all in his image, which if you've ever been to Apocalypse, you can imagine it would not shake out well for us. He wants to. So if he has the anti-life equation, he can control everyone.
Yes.
Control their minds, and then he will rule. He will do to the galaxy, to the universe, what he's done to Apocalypse, which wasn't a great place before, but it definitely hasn't improved under him.
If you get a chance, read the 2017 Mr. Miracle run by Tom King.
Absolute
Oh,
masterpiece.
it is beautiful.
fantastic. All right, so I believe at that point then, Matt, you're back in the hot seat. Who's your villain?
I was gonna say somebody like the Joker, but I decided to go a little different direction and pick Walter Joseph Kovacs. He's a I liked Watchmen.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's one of those things I just love to read over and over again, and Alan Moore's take on him, but he is insane, and he is a product of his environment. His code of morality cannot be changed, and he could be the hero or the villain depending on what you did or who you were. And I have always, for some reason, it's always struck a chord with me. Joker is my favorite villain, but everybody, I mean, there's different Joker origins. But Walter Kovacs, I just, something always sticks with me. He's got sociopathic personality disorder. His mother was a prostitute, so he looks at sex like it's, a dirty thing
Mm-hmm.
that only bad people do. And you cannot sway him on any subject at all. He's already made up his mind, and it can remain unchanged. But for whatever reason, I have always, Rorschach was always, I could never get enough, and I always wanted to read more about Rorschach. He's based on The Question,
Mm-hmm.
and something about when he was working in the dress factory, and he found the material that was for a party dress, and the woman picked up the dress and hated it and threw it out, so he kept the material and sewed himself a new face and his spotless gloves.
I've always thought Rorschach was Alan Moore taking Ditko's question, taking
Yes.
Ditko's ideology to the absolute cartoonish max. Yeah.
Yes. But for whatever reason, he was always been my favorite.
That's awesome.
Neither true hero nor true villain.
Well, anti-hero. So it
Anti-hero.
depends on what you do and what you could do.
Also, I don't know if you've mentioned, for the people that have not picked up on it, he's talking about Rorschach.
Yeah.
Just from Watchmen. I mean, there was context clues, but I don't think it was ever said. Just
But who
just
the
for
hell-
everybody
Joker?
out there.
Who's that Joker guy?
Who's that Joker guy? Yeah, that was I opted for a different low-hanging fruit, but we'll get to that later. We are going to put Rick in the hot seat now. Like, villain, Rick. Who's your villain?
Well, I'd like to preface it with a little bit of the origin story as it developed over a series of maybe 8 years in the comics,
Please do.
if I could. So a character that was introduced in 1942. So I had to read it in a reprint issue, and some of the subsequent adventures also had to be shown to me after the fact. But this was a story of a young boy. He grew up relatively poor, and he had an abusive father and led a tough life, but succeeded in rising above it and getting a good education and eventually entering law school. And he became very successful as an attorney and decided that he wanted to do more, and he became kind of a crime-fighting district attorney for the city, Gotham City, as it were, and was a supporter of young policemen who rose through the ranks and became commissioner, Jim Gordon. And this fellow who was the district attorney was a guy named originally Harvey Kent, which they later changed because
Guess they had to.
too similar to Clark Kent and Kent Allard, who was the Shadow, and so many other Kents that there were in the media at the time.
Two-Face L or something.
So I became Harvey Dent, but Harvey and Jim were great crime fighters for the city of Gotham, and of course Batman became an arm of that same crime fighting team. And he was an admirable person. He had high standards. He was very smart. He had been through a rough life and was making a difference. And through no fault of his own, while prosecuting a mobster named Sal Maroni, I think,
Salvatore, yeah.
he was splashed with a corrosive acidic solution on the left side of his face. Notice it was not the right side, because the right is good and the left is bad. you know, in the symbolic way.
Take that,
And
lefties.
and
Take
he,
that, lefties.
and my dad and my sister are lefties, by the way, so they're going to hate that. But he was disfigured and had a mental breakdown, as one would under such horrifying circumstances, and was crushed and was fighting his way back from his recovery, but had a complete break, and became actually mentally ill, insane, as it were. And he fixated on duality because now he was a different person than he used to be, and he was curious about evil because in a different way, because he had been a good, upstanding citizen, and now he had these dark thoughts, and he became obsessed with the number 2, and began calling himself Two-Face, and found that he would commit crimes, and he found some kind of pleasure from that, retribution, I guess, for what had happened to him. And he took a coin and he scarred one side of it with a piece of metal, and it was a two-headed coin. So when the scratched side came up, he would do something rotten, so go on a rampage, and he would keep the proceeds and the benefit of that. And if the coin that he flipped showed with the good side, he would do something awful, but he would give the money to orphans or a church, or he would surrender it to someone he knew would do good with it. And of course, this was difficult for Commissioner Gordon and Batman to fight, because this was their good friend, someone they used to eat dinner with and hang out with and admired. And they couldn't, can you imagine punching your best friend in the face, when he's mentally ill? I think that would be even beyond Batman's dark nature. So it was very difficult for him to be taken care of in a proper way, a way that was going to benefit his healing and also protect the city. So for me, that villain is very, very interesting. And he can't help himself, and it's tragic. So many of the villains are they're bad just because they're bad people, and this man was a good man, and he couldn't help himself, and he still can't help himself, and I find that tragic and interesting. So that's my favorite comic villain.
Boy, great.
Off the top of your head, too.
Jeez.
No, it's
I also like Two-Face.
he is neat.
He's good.
Remember, I bought the bookends that are
Oh, that's right.
Harvey Dent and,
Yes, they're downstairs.
and Two-Face. Yes. So.
They're great.
Well, Craig, let's end it with you.
Alrighty, I chose Magneto.
Bet you're glad you didn't choose Two-Face now, huh?
Oh yeah, and I'm so glad that I've decided to go after
Follow
Rick
that
each
act.
time. Yeah. So Magneto is just always been fun, and I've loved, like, not unlike Two-Face. I can tie it in that way. Like, you don't, his parents being murdered for being Jewish, and he himself being Jewish and ending up in Auschwitz, and that being where you discover you have these powers. It's not a great start. It's the same start as Batman, and he walked that path for a while. He tried, at least, as far as, like,
Deck was stacked.
the deck was stacked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't that, it was, okay, so it's not like it stopped there. Then he was on the run.
But every cushion that Batman had, Magneto did not.
Yeah.
No, not until he, stole the Nazi gold. And then and then when him and Charles had the falling out, he's like, I'm going to take this Nazi gold and I'm walking. And that was that. But just even the, Charles tried to be that friend, tried to be that guy. And it's just like the hits just keep on coming with him. And even now, you fast forward, he's still walking back and forth, which I have tons of respect for the guy, considering everything that's happened. He gets out of the concentration camp and he ended up in what? Ukraine? Whatever. That's where he met his wife, where ultimately he had the kids, and that what's her name? The one in the movies, it's a lady in the
Quicksilver and
Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch.
Yes.
But that was hidden from him. He's not even able to. His real name, I always forget. His real name is Max. And then it went to Magnus.
Not Eric.
And then it turned to Eric was like his third time on the run.
Eric,
because he had been captured and escaped multiple times. Like,
He would seem hard to keep in custody. But
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're like, what's going on with these handcuffs? But, you know, I mean, it's not, go grab the fuzzy ones. We'll see if those work.
There's another two-faced tie-in though. Like Rick said, watching your trying to punch your best friend, you get it. Charles saw the good man in him.
Yes.
And just how do you reconcile that with the very good points that the guy makes?
Well, and that's the part where it's always been really, I've always found him fascinating, him being Magneto, because first of all, he's no slouch on the mutant scale. He's Omega.
Yeah, Omega level.
And, you know, he can tear stuff up when he wants to. But I feel like he always, I mean, even with the things he's done, I still feel like there has been restraint. Mm-hmm. Just because, like, it's that story, like, it's so crazy, and I love these stories where it's like these human pieces of garbage, and there's always one guy who's like, well, they've done some pretty cool stuff, and they're like, yeah, but they're bad. You know, that happens over and over and over again. But this is probably my favorite iteration of that, honestly, as far as storytelling goes. Like, I love the way that Charles keeps trying, and I love that Magneto keeps at least listening. You know, because there's that time period, I think, recently even, you know, full disclosure, I have not been able to read House of X, where I'm caught up with everything. So I know Krakoa exists, I know all of that, and I know Magneto plays some part in being in
he's on the
charge.
governing council, actually.
Yeah, and essentially a good guy, kind of, because now that conflict is kind of, you know, we're able to kind of separate. He can just, you know, he's just standing for what he always stood for.
He wants what's best for his people, but
Right.
it's at the detriment of everyone else, whereas Charles, a bit more of a pacifist.
Sure. So that's where I'm coming from. I think that's always been, and I can honestly say also, I do like him because also I feel like there has been a decent representation of him in, obviously, the comics, but then also cinematically.
Yeah.
Like, I think...
well, yes, the two people that have played him in the movies anyway are both
Sir Ian
fantastic.
McKellen and the dreamy Michael Fassbender.
But also, I think the scripts and everything did it justice, and I feel like it was well done, where he's relatable, but you know who the bad guy is, right? So yeah, that's,
And let's be honest, we grew up in the '90s. He looked cool.
he looked very
Kirby's
cool.
hell.
The great design, the Jim Lee covers. I mean, yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was an actual Stan Lee story. Jack Kirby. Sorry, I'm going back to the important spots now, so you guys can just run out and pick up this first appearance. It is X-Men #1 from September of 1963.
But on sale in June.
But on sale in June, because they only were how many months?
They had a newsstand. Like the date, the cover that was on it was the date it was supposed to. At the end of that month, they would take it off the spinner rack, so it would come out like June or July and sit there until September. And September 30th, it would be pulled.
Most magazines are still like that too.
Are they?
Yes,
So they treated it the same way.
they're put out early.
But I bought it. I mean, I bought that
Yeah.
off the stands, and I remember it was a summer issue that I bought.
That's
It came out the same day as the My Greatest Adventure Doom Patrol first issue too.
That's right.
X-Men and Doom Patrol have always been considered to be maybe something their insiders were talking back and forth.
Right.
Because they're very similar.
Written by Arnold Drake of Dead Man fame.
there you go. That ties it all back in.
All of a piece. But as you were saying, I'm sorry.
No, I think we're good at that point, and we're going to wrap it up and hit up the socials. So you can visit us at www.thearcade.com. Catch us on Instagram under The Arcade Comics and Collectibles, Facebook, The Arcade Comics and Collectibles, Twitter, The Arcade Comics and Collectibles, and we will see you next week.
Remember, support your local comic shops. They're not doing as well as you think they are.
Yes, they are not. And we will see you soon. Thanks.